Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Strife's Talking Points. And today I've found this video. I didn't know it was out there. I want to talk about the NBC news coverage of Antifa. The gentleman you see right here has a Rose City Antifa shirt on, and you can see the typical Antifa dress, black mask, hoodie, sunglasses, completely covered. They're not carrying any weapons to this because I assume that NBC is essentially going to toss them some softballs. I've watched the interview once or twice now, and I want to go through. I've got some information across the top, of course, I'll get to. As always, please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think about how I see this as the growing violence in our country is starting to come more and more from the left. And there's a very interesting take on Antifa from the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, and also some interesting way the SPLC looks at them. So here we go. When you say put our bodies, that sounds like passive, meaning he just said he was going to place himself in between fascist and communities. But we're going to listen to him.
But you are acting with your bodies. You're also hitting and you're throwing things and you're reacting.
Now, far-right groups and anti-fascist clash in Portland over the weekend. Now, the term far-right is being used more and more these days as the media and I would say the left have moved to an extreme left, much more into where socialism and communism are no longer considered far left ideas. They're just considered, the left anymore. And the term far right is being thrown around quite a bit by the media. And I think that's kind of started with how they are trying to cover these left wing groups like Antifa and some of the others.
Violently.
I think self-defense can look violent if you're looking at it as the person who responds in self-defense is as culpable, but we don't see it that way.
Now, they're saying that if you're responding in self-defense, that you are not culpable, which most people would say, hey, if someone attacks you and you fight back, it's the attacker's fault, not the person who was attacked. And that's the way Antifa wants to portray themselves, as we are only responding to violence. We are not starting violence. Even though they attack police, they attack everyone, they attack random people, they bear spray, they're violent.
We see ourselves as engaging in self-defense from groups who want to do our community harm.
Now, groups that want to do our community harm, it's always something that gets talked about. And if you hold a rally and you're in support of the president, that's something that they believe does their community harm. How? No one knows. They don't really explicitly say. They just kind of circular logic.
Whose ideology is the ideology of genocide and mass murder.
Now, they always return to that ideology of genocide and mass murder. Now, if you refer to extremists on the right, like your neo-Nazis and true white supremacists, they kind of fit into that. But what Antifa is doing now is they've skewed that, and I'm going to go reference that from the ADL here in just a minute.
So in the sense of reaction, we see fascism as an inherently violent ideology. So when we disrupt its organizing, we see that as self-defense.
The very presence of organizations and people who you would call fascist or fascist leaning, that very presence is violent, and so your violent reaction would be self-defense.
Now, she's just made a statement. It's supposed to be a little more inquisitive, but that's the way Antifa is trying to portray themselves. Hey, if you are right-leaning, if you have any conservative views, you're violent. Your presence, your life, you being alive is violence, and they have the right then to attack you, to swarm, to attack, to harass, to dox, to go after you. That's what Antifa is going for, and she's kind of milling around that point instead of going directly at them, saying that's not how it works.
Ideologically, that's what you believe. In reality, in the legal system, that would count as assault.
Yeah, so she says it. That's assault. You're committing assault. These people aren't there endangering you. You're committing assault.
Does that concern you at all?
One of our points of unity is that we don't depend on the cops or the courts to do the work of opposing white supremacy.
Now, they don't believe in the cops or the courts. Now, I'm going to skip from this interview real quick. We're going to go to another news story that broke a few days ago. This is on the Proud Boys brawl. Alleged victims won't testify at Proud Boys trial for... this is the brawl that happened where they were outside of the Republican Club. Gavis and McGinnis came and spoke to a group of Proud Boys and some other people there to come and listen and just hear him talk. It's sort of like a comedy routine. The stuff I saw, he's trying to make jokes, hit a plastic sword, just goofing off. It's meant to be like a gentleman's club. However, for several hours before the event, there's video, Antifa was there harassing, smashing windows, committing graffiti. And here's why you see Antifa dressed like this. Assistant GA said that the suspected Antifa members that defendants John Chrisman and Maxwell Hare pummeled, kicked, and stomped on October 12, 2018 refused to cooperate with police. Prosecutors weren't able to identify the alleged victims after extensive efforts because they're dressed like this. They're saying they don't need the police, they don't want to use the police, including social media searches and use of facial recognition software. Can't facial recognition software off of that. Segrest told jurors during opening statements in Manhattan Supreme Court. In the indictment, they're only named spiky belt, ponytail, shaved head, and khaki in reference to their appearance in the caught on camera melee. So, for the riot, the incite to riot, that these Proud Boys who go out where you can see their faces, where you can see them, where you know who they are, there's a riot, there's a fight. I believe depending on which way you say it, it was definitely a violent assault. Antifa members, 6 Antifa members ran up on them, according to police reports. They had circled the building. Here, as Kings and Hare and approximately 30 other Proud Boys strolled down Park Avenue, a group of 6 suspected Antifa members wearing the movement's distinct black masks and clothing walked down toward them and tossed a water bottle at them. Now, this is after the video that I've seen. There's a lot of evidence out there of them standing out protesting, throwing things at cars, throwing bottles of urine. I believe one of the things I saw was they were throwing feces at them. The police escorted the Proud Boys out the other side, going down that way. Apparently, Antifa circled the building, came up on the other side, and the riot ensued. Now, when you look at these guys, it's a big guy, probably a fairly fit man there, very skinny. That's I believe that's a woman, and they get in a fight. Well, what happens? Proud Boys get pumped up about the fight. They beat him up, they smash him down, they get attacked, they fight. These guys here get beat up, and then because they don't believe police, courts are there for them, they run away. They get away, they nurse their wounds somewhere else, and that's what you get. They don't believe the police should be there. And they don't get arrested because they have their faces covered, so they avoid being charged in a riot because they're like this. Very interesting the way Antifa gets away with things. You see this in Portland, you see this in, you've seen it in Berkeley, you've seen it in all these other places.
Would be self-defense. Although ideologically that's what you believe, in reality, in the legal system, that would count as assault. Does that concern you at all?
One of our points of unity is that we don't depend on the cops or the courts to do the work of opposing white supremacy.
So if they attack mixed race people, mixed race groups, they don't need the cops. Now, we're going to go over to an ADL information here. This is their who are Antifa story. This is from the ADL. It's not something I'm making up. We're going to skip down about halfway. The current political climate increases the chances of violent confrontations at protests and rallies. Antifa have expanded their definition of fascist fascism, to include not just white supremacists and other extremists, but also many conservatives and supporters of President Trump. In Berkeley, for example, some Antifa were captured on a video harassing a Trump supporter with no known extremist connections. Antifa have falsely characterized some recent right-wing rallies as Nazi events, even though they're not actually white supremacist in nature. Now, Antifa is now violent. All forms of Antifa violence are problematic. Additionally, violence plays into the victimhood narrative of white supremacists and other right-wing extremists, and can be used for recruiting purposes. Images of these free speech protests being beaten back by black-clad, bandana-masked Antifa provide white-wing extremists with a powerful propaganda tool. I don't know if you know this about how reality works, but as you see extremism rise in one group, and if it's actually called out by the media, imagine these, if they actually covered, let's say, Charlottesville or a lot of these other places correctly, if they actually showed the footage of all the other groups that were there and didn't just focus on these white supremacists there and the Antifa rioters that clashed with them. Imagine if they had actually covered all the other groups that were there, and you could have a more balanced idea of what actually happened. You could say, oh my God, Antifa is violent. What if they covered Berkeley protests and things like that? And they go on with some more stuff saying, hey, the right-wing people are more violent, but Antifa is on the rise. This is something that's getting mainstream attention. Every time Antifa gets violent, it's covered up by the news, and they're sort of promoted. You see that quite often.
You're saying that when far-right groups come here and throw demonstrations and have their
numerous social media postings that they stated. See on this.
Now here's some fake information from Antifa.
Upcoming rally on Saturday that they've stated that explicitly in numerous social media postings that they want to hurt, maim, and they've made threats of killing anti-fascists.
Why do you?
They actually made threats that if Antifa attacked them, they would fight back, which they do. However, when they fight back, there's one thing that they need to do. It's unmask the person assaulting them. If you're being attacked by an Antifa member, pull off his hood, pull off his mask. That way his face can be found and he can be tracked. There, to my knowledge, were absolutely no posts from the Proud Boys about this. Proud Boys, of course, are a mixed race group. They only say that the West is a good place, that most countries would do better if they adopted Western ideas, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of association, capitalist behavior, things like that.
They come to Portland.
And they see it as this liberal city, this city emblematic of values that they oppose. And they see it as a city where the left has strength and they want to attack and defeat that.
Now, some of the stuff I've seen on Portland, this is from right-wing sources, are that Portland is crumbling. Portland is growing, massive homeless issues, massive debt crisis looming. The city is overrun by these left-wing extremists who shut down the streets, attack people at random, and the police, the mayor, the governor, none of them do anything. They just let it go. They keep letting it go, and it's grown out of control. And I believe, now, this is not me saying it, but that's what these right-wing groups that I've seen going there are actually trying to show.
Do you think your presence here attracts them as well?
I think to a certain degree, but they would come here regardless of our presence. If we weren't here, if anti-fascists, if the numerous people who come out with us in the street.
Now, They might still go there. I don't know. Can't really take him on his point there. We're going to skip ahead here. Sorry. The SPLC. Does SPLC list any far left hate groups? This has always confused me because if you ever look at SPLC and these other groups, when they talk about left and right, they're only using skin color to determine left from right. When they talk about religious extremism, well, if you're Christian, it's right wing. If you're Islam, it's left wing. No, those are both forms of religious extremism, and they should fit on the same side. Whichever side you pick goes to that side. One of the issues I kind of always see with the SPLC is they themselves are basically lying to raise money. I believe the SPLC should be challenged legally, and generally whenever you see people file lawsuits, the SPLC has to remove their information because they're mostly just doing this to drum up money and support. Our goal is to identify, this from the SPLC, all US-based groups that meet our definition of a hate group, regardless whether one would think of the group as being on the far left or the far right. One can always debate whether a group should be considered left or right. The Nation of Islam, which we list as anti-Semitic, Nation of Islam, Farrakhan, which links you directly to the Squad, the Democratic Congresswomen. They are supporters, they are fans, they meet with him, they speak with him. Anti-Semitism and vilification of white people is a case in point. Another example is Jat al-Muslimin, a Muslim group we list because of the vilification of Jews and the LGBT community. If they were white or Christian, these would be far right. But as a general matter, prejudice on the basis of these factors such as race is more prevalent on the far right than it is on the far left. You've just said you can't use race. You're using race, not ideas, to decide if they're far left or far right. So if they're white, they're on the right. If they're not white, they're on the left. Stupid way to do this. This does not mean that extremism and violence on the left are not concerns, but groups that engage in anti-fascist violence, such as Antifa, for example, differ from hate groups in that they are not typically organized around bigotry against people based on the characteristics listed above. So they're attacking people not based on their race. They're attacking people based on intimidate any political opponents. They are a political action group which classify people as Nazis or white supremacists even when they're not. Antifa is a left-wing political hate group and should be kind of considered that way. Over the last few years, we've seen them grow and grow and grow. Now, here's an interview from the Washington Examiner with SPLC on that. Leader of the Southern Poverty Law Center and blah, 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 but won't brand it with the center's often cited hate group designation because they're on the far left. They're a political group which hates everyone. We oppose these groups and what they're trying to do. We just don't think anyone should be able to censor someone else's speech. The SPLC is all about trying to censor other people's speech. That's actually why they exist. They want to shut these people down, get them fired, make it impossible for them to speak. That's their whole purpose. We think they are contributing to the problem we are seeing, Cohen said. We think it's likely to lead to other forms of retaliation. In Berkeley, Antifa showed up to shut down speeches. The next time white supremacists brought the Oath Keepers with them, they brought their own army. Now, I looked this up. He is referring to the April 2017 Berkeley riots with Antifa, and yeah, so what you have here, in several groups, including approximately 50 members of the right-wing group Oath Keepers. Oath Keepers is not designated as a hate group. They're designated as an anti-government group. A bunch of retired military police officers got together, and they are trying to protect people's first, second constitutional rights. They do not believe that government has the right to take away your free speech, take your guns, take your land, take your property. They are against that. Kind of support them in that. On April 15th, blah, 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 Oath Keepers held a pro-Trump rally and were met by protesters, including Antifa activists. Planned speakers included Brittany Pettibone and Lauren Southern. The event was organized as a free speech rally by Rich Black, who organized the March 4th Trump event. On the Martin Luther Civic Center, large number of fights broke out. Smoke bombs, fireworks were thrown into the melee, pepper spray was used. According to Los Angeles, both groups threw rocks and sticks at each other and used large trash bins as battering rams as the crowd moved around the perimeter of the park. Now, at the center of the park were the pro-Trump people. Around the outside were the Antifa. 11 people were injured, 6 of whom were hospitalized, including one person who was stabbed. Police seized a handful of cans of pepper spray, some knives, dozen flagpoles, skateboards, other blunt objects from the crowd members. 20 people arrested. Antifa people were arrested. You have to specify who's being arrested. The rioters. A Reuters reporter estimated between 500 and 1,000 people, this is Wikipedia, were in the park at the rally. Various far-right activists, can't call them far-right, held up anti-Semitic signs. And some made Nazi salutes, others used neo-Nazi symbols such as Black Sun, Sunbeard. Yeah, I'd like to see pictures of this. I want to look for it. During the event, Nathan Diego, 30-year-old California State student and founder of the white supremacist group Identity Europa. Yeah, ADL and the Southern Poverty Law Center are hard to take them seriously because if you believe that being white is popular and normal and good, there you go. But Identity Europa, don't know anything about them. We'll go with them being a white supremacist group. Punched a female protester in the face and then ran into the crowd. The attack was captured on video and prompted calls for DiMaggio's arrest or expulsion. Cal State said to investigate. Also during the event, a man covered with bandana attacked 3 protesters with a bike lock. That is the Antifa man. Hitting them on the head, causing significant injuries. He was later identified by as user as former Diablo Valley College professor and subsequently arrested. This is a professor on 3 counts. Assault with a deadly weapon, ultimately sentenced to probation after pleading no contest to all charges. So Antifa didn't get any major issues. A guy who actually assault with a deadly weapon got no charges. On April 18th, UC administrators canceled a planned appearance on the campus by conservative columnist Ann Coulter, a Fox News TV person. This is as mainstream right as you can get. Not far right, not extreme right, just far right, citing safety concerns. Again, they're scared of Antifa and these riots. Coulter tweeted on April 19th that she would be coming to Berkeley to speak on the date regardless. On April 20th, the university stated that they would host Coulter on May 2nd at a protected venue that would be disclosed at a later date. Noting that she was unavailable May 2nd and the UC Berkeley had no classes scheduled for that week. They were going to let her come during spring break. And she would hold her April 27th with or without the university's consent. She later said she did not intend to speak, but she might attend the April 27th event. Right-wing activist Brittany Pettibone delivered remarks promising that conservatives will refuse to stand down, which was met with applause from the crowd. Blah, blah, blah. Other speakers, Lauren Southern. Social media feeds the left wing, right wing. Anyway, so what you see is attacks, fear, violence. That's every time Antifa comes around. You see it. August 27th, 2,000 to 4,000 people attended rally against hate Protest against the far right, say no to Marxism. Now, Marxism is much more violent than fascism or any other form of anything out there. Marxism and communism are extremely the big killers. Sorry, I've ended up rambling on this thing, but there you go. You see Antifa, this is what they look like. So they don't get arrested and don't face charges is why they dress like that. It allows them to go out, to start fights, to get in fights, and to get away. They are not held accountable, as this man who assault with a deadly weapon shows back from 2017. Yeah, from 2017. More recently, you had a Patriot Prayer leader had a warrant for his arrest in Portland. He turned himself in because there's video of him not getting in a fight in front of a bar. There's actually video of him trying to break up the bar fight, trying to stop it. And in the initial video that I saw on the Seattle Fox 9, I believe it was, they actually see him talking to the group, just talking to them, videoing the whole thing, and an Antifa member runs up, sprays bear spray on everyone, and then quickly darts away. Antifa is a violent group. They expect to be violent, and they cover the faces up so that they can be. These are the American left militants. This is a political movement. This is a quote-unquote a religion. These are our communists. These are our socialists. These are our Marxists coming to take your stuff away by force, by violence, and to silence you using that same force and violence. Thank you all for listening. Let me know what you think. Again, I can't hide my opinion on this. I believe Antifa are violent. I believe they are extremists. I believe as they get more and more pumped up from the media, it's only going to get worse.
Repression.
So you wouldn't remove your masks and say the things that you just said?
Not on camera.
Yeah.
So Antifa doesn't want to be on camera. They don't want you to know who they are. They don't want you to know what they are. They just want you to know that they're in charge and you're a